Alone in the Dark is a remake of the classic game released in 1992, and it had a rocky release in March of 2024. It was plagued with technical issues and suffered from direct comparisons with other games like Resident Evil 4 Remake and Alan Wake 2. So, is Alone in the Dark worth checking out? This review is going to answer that question. I have played Alone in the Dark on console, where it's available on the Xbox Series X and S and the PlayStation 5. It's also available on PC through Steam.
I received a disturbing letter from Jeremy accusing the staff and all the other patients of being involved in some cult. And now they are also out to get him.
Could it be real? Or is it all just in his head?
Let's start the review by talking about what Alone in the Dark is. It's a third-person, over-the-shoulder survival horror game. It features 3 main gameplay elements: combat, exploration, and puzzle solving. I think it would be easiest to review the gameplay in these 3 chunks, one at a time, starting with exploration. Alone in the Dark is set in the late 1920s or early 1930s, and you get to choose between playing as Emily Hartwood or Edward Carnby. We'll cover the story in a later section, but for now, we'll keep it pretty simple. Emily's uncle sent her a concerning letter and has apparently gone missing. He lives in this creepy mental institution / recovery center, and Emily hires Edward Carnby, a private investigator, to help her find him. So the entire game is set in this large, mansion-like mental institution. Exploration involves looking around the estate for clues, items, and keys to unlock new areas. As you do so, there are new paths to open up and new information about Emily's uncle's disappearance. To go with the exploration is linear sections that take place in the character's memories. It's these sections where the horror elements ramp up. You'll be traversing these fairly on-the-rail gameplay sections following a set path each time. They vary quite a bit, and like I said, this is where the real horror comes into play. As creepy as the mental institution is, it keeps the horror as a general vibe, whereas these memory sections just straight up throw the horror right at you. The second major gameplay element is the puzzles. Alone in the Dark is filled with them, and some are really interesting and intuitive, while others miss the mark. They come in a few varieties, from find a key or item out in the world and find where it goes, to the classic align beams of light and rearrange puzzle pieces. I found that a lot of these puzzles could be fairly easy, but there are a few that will stump you for a long time. There are clues out in the world, but the game doesn't really hold your hand or give you a lot of hints with the puzzles. You'll need to refer back to books or notes for clues that you found around the environments, recognize numbers that are scrawled around, or safe combinations or symbols found on items. I can honestly say that I only had trouble with a few of them, mostly the safe combinations where you need to find the combination from word clues. But if you're the type of player that hates puzzles, you may have trouble with Alone in the Dark.
I think it's meant for the talisman. I think it needs numbers, like coordinates. Maybe there's something in Jeremy's notes.
The final gameplay chunk is combat, and this is where Alone in the Dark fails pretty hard. Your character, whether you choose Emily or Edward, walks like they're moving through molasses. You feel like your character is stumbling drunk half the time, and the only other option is to run, and that can be too fast and too noisy, often putting you in the line of fire of the game's enemies if you do so. So most of the time, you're carefully walking like a snail through the levels until an enemy pops out and you clumsily try to aim your weapon and fire at it. The guns are really bad in Alone in the Dark, which is clearly a deliberate choice. You aim slowly and the reticle widens terribly if you move or after you shoot. You have limited ammo, so you need to make every shot count, but it doesn't help that every enemy is a damage sponge. You can often take a full round of pistol shots or shotgun shells and they still won't go down. So you have to unload a clip at them in the hopes that they die, and when they don't, you bash them to death with your weapon, provided you picked one up and it hasn't lost its durability yet. You can get a few smacks in with a hatchet, pipe, or other close-range weapon before they break. If you do run out of ammo and find yourself without a melee weapon, good luck, because you have no other option than to just run away and hope you can reach a safe point before you die. Combat reminds me a lot of Alan Wake or Resident Evil 4, but not nearly so refined. It's the game's weakest point, and it's not helped that there are only a few enemy types. Zombie types or bugs that rush at you to close the distance, making hitting them very difficult. You start the game with a pistol, but eventually you unlock a shotgun if you picked up enough collectibles in the world. A Tommy gun that drains ammo like crazy and can't hit anything if you hold down the trigger. And then you have your shotgun, which is the best, but it also has very limited ammo, and like I said, it's only available if you picked up the collectibles in the world as you explored it. After you pick up 3 of a certain type of collectible, the shotgun cabinet opens up and you can grab it. In my opinion, the shotgun is essential. These collectibles also give you details about the world around you, and you can also unlock a secret ending for both characters, provided you play the game with each character at least once and then find all the items in the levels.
Oh, wow. That's striking. I want to save this one. All right, come on. I want to go see Dr. Gray.
Alright, let's talk about the 2 characters and how the narrative changes when you play as each. Let's start with Edward Carnby, since that's who I played the game with. Edward is an outsider in this place, meaning people are more distrustful of him than Emily. He's a private detective that is trying to find Emily's uncle, and he isn't entirely sure what's happening in this place. Edward's playthrough is a lot less clear on what's happening than Emily's. People don't tell him much in their dialogue, as opposed to Emily, who finds out more from the NPCs. So Edward has to piece things together from the clues he finds. But don't worry, if you want to play through the game once, you can still get a fairly good idea of what's happening in the story if you only stick with Edward instead of Emily. Narratively, aside from the minor dialogue changes and NPC interactions, the game is basically the same with both characters. The only difference comes in one chapter where each of the characters' background is explored more, meaning you have to play both to get the full picture of all their motivations and their history. Edward has a haunted past involving a case he worked with a few years ago, and Emily's past involves the war. But aside from this part, the rest of the story plays out pretty much the same way.
Welcome to the madhouse, Detective.
Thanks. Did the ceiling just collapse?
I heard it was something in the attic, something that was supposed to happen but didn't. How that could have such consequences is beyond me. The truth is, I don't know why the room looks like this, but I bet your friend Jeremy does.
For that story, both Emily and Edward are looking for Jeremy Hartwood, Emily's uncle who's being treated at this manor, a place for the mentally fatigued. It's part plantation house, part mental health institute. The place is run down and can change as the game progresses. Right off the bat, this pair finds that something isn't quite right in the manor, as all the people here are very strange and Jeremy is nowhere to be found. They separate, and for most of the game, Emily and Edward only have a few interactions with each other. You find that Jeremy is being haunted by the Dark Man, some evil being of immense power that has made a deal with Jeremy for reasons unknown. For a lot of the game, you aren't really sure if what's happening is real or just in your head. No one in the game really mentions the weird stuff that you're seeing, or they question Jeremy's absence or deal with the Dark Man. To counter this point, there is a lot of stuff about the cult and Lovecraftian horror elements going on here. There are a lot of mentions of the Black Goat of the Woods with 1,000 young and a few other Lovecraftian elements. The story is really disjointed, and even if you're reading everything, exploring everywhere, and talking to everyone, you're never really quite sure what's happening. Part of it is the fact that you need to play through the game with both Emily and Edward to get the full story, but even then, it's clear that things in the story were either rushed or just glossed over. This is apparent in the game's length. It's only about 8 to 10 hours, depending on how much you explore and how much the puzzles confuse you. As you repeat the game with the other character, none of this stuff changes, so you can just blast through it even quicker. There are 5 chapters, although the last chapter is just really short. It feels like you're just getting going in the first half, digging deep into the past, when all of a sudden you're transported to another place, there's this giant reveal and a boss battle, and the game ends.
Do you want to come see Dr. Gray?
No, I want to try something. With this talisman, I think I can follow Jeremy to the place he mentioned in the book. What was the name? Do you remember something Spanish? Tarawea. Yeah, that's where I need to go.
Detective? Are you gonna be alright?
Yeah, of course. Go talk to Dr. Gray. We'll rendezvous later.
From a technical and graphical standpoint, you can feel the lack of budget in Alone in the Dark. It released in a rough state, and even after a few patches, it's not perfect. There are glitches, FPS drops when loading to new areas, and this weird screen tearing on the bottom of the screen that happens at times. Enemies can be bugged, doors may not open at times, and I had to reload the game after I couldn't pick up items in the levels. Graphically, Alone in the Dark looks good, but not great. The levels feel very small, there isn't a lot of enemy variety, and the character models, while looking good at times, they're not as great as other games in the genre. Their faces and their hair look good, but their mouths don't really move to match the speech a lot of the times. It feels like a last-gen game for the PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, or even a remastered PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360 game. When you compare it to other titles in 2023 and 2024 in the same genre, like Resident Evil 4 Remake, Alan Wake 2, or even the Dead Space remake, Alone in the Dark just isn't on that same level, which is a shame since this is a $60 game, and for such a short length, I would at least want it to be very good looking with a memorable experience for that price. Instead, if this was released as a $30 or $40 game, it would have reviewed better on release.
Thanks.
What are you doing? Who are you?
Whoa, pardon me, excuse me. My name is Edward Carnby, private investigator. I hope you don't mind we let ourselves inside.
I do mind. This is private property. You can't just barge in here.
I'm sorry about all this, but I'm looking for my uncle. It's urgent, and no one was answering the door.
Game is really short, and I felt that the second half wasn't nearly as good as the first. It ends abruptly, and it starts a bit slow. Some players may find this boring or too easy. The controls on console are very janky, and the combat is very awkward. The mouths of the characters don't match the dialogue, and there are multiple bugs and glitches. It's overpriced for what you get at $60. It should have been $30 to $40 instead, so grab it on sale if you can.
Good luck, Detective. Hope to see you again soon.
Underperformed at launch, and I doubt we will see a sequel. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to my channel. I'm the Casual Console Gamer, and I'll see you all in the next review.